Accounting 2 tutoring session over Chapter 19. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion over cost, volume, profit analysis. As we discussed in the last video, we are comparing activity level to cost. So in the last video we talked about variable costs, which are proportionally respective in total to volume or units of activity. So if there's 5 cents of variable cost to make this marker, if I make 2 markers, it'll be 10 cents. 3 markers, 15 cents, and so on. We talked about fixed costs, which are the same no matter what. Examples of that were straight line depreciation and double declining balance depreciation. Chapter 19, like I said, is just a continuation of cost, volume, profit analysis. The chapter itself has additional issues. So the chapter starts on page 984. So in the last video, we already talked about some of the main ideas. So today I'm just going to talk about some high points that you should have noted, at least in this chapter, and remembered from chapter 18. So we remember our costs. We just talked about variable costs and fixed costs. The other thing you need to remember is contribution margin. And we know that contribution margin is sales subtract variable costs. And that can be a unit or total. So you could take total sales, subtract total variable cost, or unit sale price, subtract unit variable cost, okay? And then we've got our contribution margin ratio, which is equal to the contribution margin divided by sales. That's very important. And remember, the contribution margin varies with activity level, because if you've got X amount of sales and you're taking out your variable cost, and variable costs are variable, that means your contribution margin, which is the solution to that, is also going to be proportional in number to activity level or volume. Some of the brief exercises, I don't know if these are assigned to you, that I would look at are brief exercise 19.3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 11. Some of these are repetitive from chapter 18, just to make sure you remember how to do break-even dollars, break-even units, and then there's 1 or 2 talking about margin of safety and sales mix, and we'll talk about that in this video here. So margin of safety, the first idea that we're going to talk about is that, and that is a cushion that companies install so that when they break even, they actually don't have zero net income, okay? So margin of safety, let's say we had sales of $100, okay? And we have an estimated or projected net income of $50, okay? We have a margin of safety equals $50, okay? So what that means is, instead of breaking completely even, you want $50 of net income. I just realized you can't see that. There we go. So sales, your projected net income, and your margin of safety. Now, one of these formulas that has to deal with break even is altered, okay, whenever we talk about kind of margin of safety. So your break even dollars formula, okay, is now going to be your fixed cost, plus that net income, okay, and that's all going to be divided by your contribution margin ratio, okay. So that alters that formula a little bit, but that's pretty easy to grasp onto, because when you actually break even, okay, this is 0, so it's plus 0 net income, okay, and that was in chapter 18. But now, break even dollars is kind of in quotation marks if you have a projected net income, because that means you have a margin of safety, okay? So you may have a couple questions throughout your homework or maybe on an exam about margin of safety, so that's what that idea is. That's one of those additional things you can think about with cost, volume, profit analysis. The second thing we're going to talk about, and this is brief exercise 19.7, if you want to go work this, we're going to talk about sales mix, okay? So let's just take a hypothetical example, okay? Let's say, what are we going to make? Let's say we're making pencil sharpeners, okay? Let's say that this model pencil sharpener is sitting in front of me. Okay, let's say that it costs $5 to make. Okay, and let's say we sell it for $20. Okay, so we have a contribution margin per unit of $15. Okay, we may have other models of pencil sharpeners. Okay, and those might have a higher or lower contribution margin than, what was it, $10, $15, whatever I said for that model of pencil sharpener. What you have to look at is something called sales mix, okay? And sales mix is an idea that I'm sure has a glossary, a word in the glossary with a definition. But my idea of it is the percentage of sales a model is. Model in quotation marks. So if you make different forms, or like I said, model of an item, you see what percentage of your sales is that item. Okay, so it might cost you more to make one item. Okay, so let's say it cost us $20 to make one item, but it costs us $3 to make the other. You may think, okay, we need to make the one that costs less to us so we can make more and sell more. Well, you have to look at how many you sell. So now we're not just looking at what our activity level that we can produce. We're looking at what we can sell. Because if you make the item and can't sell it, that's a worse problem than almost not being able to make it, in my opinion, because then you're just sitting there with inventory that you can't sell. So that's why we have to consider this, okay? So that's sales mix. So make sure you understand the idea of that. Brief exercise 1911 is getting into the idea that up until this point, we have assumed that we have unlimited resources, okay? So for this one, let's go ahead and I'll write it on the board. So we've got product A and we've got product B, okay? Product A has a contribution margin per unit of $12, and unit B, or product B, has 15, okay? And then machine hours to make these items, okay? So machine hours for product A are 2, product B are 3, okay? So if our contribution margin per unit, before we take into consideration machine hours, okay? So we know that contribution margin is sales subtract unit cost, or variable cost, okay? The higher the contribution margin, the more we want to make, right? You'd think that's right, okay? So judging on the contribution margin per unit, we want to make more of product B, right? Well, when we do that, when we assume that without taking into consideration these hours, we're assuming unlimited resources, okay? So what we're going to do is divide these by each other, okay? And then we get our contribution margin per machine hour, okay? So for product A, it's $6. For product B, it's $5, okay? So what this is saying, to interpret this a little bit, is if we take 1 hour and we invest it completely into making one of these two products, okay? Out of 1 hour of work, we can make a contribution margin of $6 for product A or $5 for product B, okay? So just a couple seconds ago, we talked about not margin of safety. We did talk about margin of safety, but we talked about a sales mix, okay? So according to this right here, we want to make more of this unit, right? Because now we make more per 1 hour, so this is goodbye because we don't have unlimited resources, right? Another thing, this isn't in this problem, but another thing you want to think of is sales mix. So let's say 30% of our sales mix is product A, and 70% of our sales mix is product B, okay? Now you have to think, well, we make a higher contribution margin per hour for product A, but we only sell 30% of all we sell as product A. So that's just a little side note, okay? That wasn't in this problem exactly, but I hope you're grasping the idea that all these things link together. Okay, so your margin of safety, your sales mix, your contribution margin per hour, and all of those things, okay? So that should be it for cost, volume, profit analysis. This is 2 chapters, so I'm sure you're sick of this by now. But that's all I've got for this video, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, as always, post them to the question and answer board. Thank you.